What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be breaking down the top 22 edge rushers in the 2025 NFL Draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going to be going through all the position groups, hopefully within the next couple weeks, so fingers crossed we can make it through before Mobile, where we will be there live on the ground in person. Super excited for that, but let's get into this. If there is a player who is not mentioned, that means that they're not fully evaluated yet, so please feel free to pump the brakes on that. We're going to be getting up to 40 edge rushers by the draft. And yes, I will put all of those in one video. You guys know I'm batshit crazy. I ended up doing 42 corners in my most recent corner video, and that might be up to like 50 by the time everything is done. I'm willing to do that just to show you guys everybody who I've fully evaluated because I think it's worth it. But I think before we even get into the video, it's key to be able to understand how I grade a player. And I do read a scouting report per player, like a scouting report game per player. So you guys will be able to walk through the game with me. But this is actually how I end up breaking players down, is both by role, tier, and category, like up to 100. So role is based on that tier. It's based on the numerical scale. So they all kind of work together. However, I do think that it is key for us to understand that, well, someone who is 80 plus is someone who I think could be an edge 1, and 75 to 80 will be an edge 2. And that means if you're 75 plus, that you should be pretty much an every down starter. Someone who I believe, if put into said role, could be an every down starter. Then you got the 70 to 75 territory. Those are the guys who should be, at least if you have a relatively solid rotation, will be among the starters. And then below that are the guys who I think need a bit more development. And there's going to be actually, this is a really good edge class. I'm going to say it right now. It's a very good edge class, and I'm super excited to be able to dive into these guys. But don't take dream fits too seriously. I honestly try my best to give you guys a relative understanding of where they will go, who should be trying to pick them, but they honestly are more there for entertainment purposes than super in-depth analysis, because a lot of teams are going to have a lot of shifting schemes with defensive coordinators and all that stuff. So again, don't take that too seriously. It's there for fun more than anything. But how I actually grade a player based on their actual grade out of 100 is based on such. Pass rush and run defense, pretty self-explanatory. However, for pass rush, it is a blend of effectiveness, of translatability, and of just overall prowess at the pass rushing position, or the pass rushing style. And then you have run defense as well. That is going to be talking about run anchor, talking about being able to shed through contact, being able to understand what the hell is going on. And these all blend together, right? So you're not going to have a horrible run defense grade and have probably a super high IQ unless you're really good at pass rush and just are not good at being able to hold your ground. Maybe you're a 230 pounder. So everything does blend in together. These are not completely individual categories, but impact of the line of scrimmage also blends in to both pass rush and run defense. It blends into pass rush because, well, you need to be able to push the pocket. That's what it essentially means. Impact is push at being able to push the pocket. For run defense, it's a little bit of being able to push the line of scrimmage, but it also is being able to hold your ground. So keep that in mind right there. It is heavily weighted towards pass rush because, when we think about edge rushers, we do like to think a lot about the pass rushing ability. Mechanics, self-explanatory. Do you have a large toolkit? Is your toolkit polished? Do you have good timing? Not many players will score well in mechanics. So, like, the ones who do are usually the ones who are going to go relatively early. Get off and bend. Pretty self-explanatory. Do you have a good first step? Do you have good flexibility? I think most of the time, those two do go hand in hand. Usually, if you have really shit bend, you're probably not going to be a very explosive player. And if you are explosive but don't have very good bend, I also have something called an it factor that I end up having that is outside of the numerical grading scale that will allow me to be able to, if I see something that isn't really captured in these categories, I can end up giving them a point here or taking a point there and so on. Athleticism, very similar, and it's like very self-explanatory. It also encapsulates strength as well, which I think is super key, but it is primarily focused on your ability to be a fast athlete. Like Twitch is get off, fast, strong, athletic. So I do think that it's super key for NFL players in the modern NFL to be able to have that top end speed ability, because you do need to get to the quarterback. There's not many plays where they're going to be over 3, 4, 5 seconds. So if you are someone who is going to be a little bit on the slower side, might not be the best chance of you being effective at the NFL level if you're not very athletic. Then you got IQ in there. That's actually super duper key. A lot of players end up failing because, well, they don't know where the ball is. It doesn't matter how good you are. You shed right through your block with the ball's already past you. Who gives a shit? Or if you shed your block and realize that you could have done a better angle or something like that to be able to affect the play, then it doesn't matter if you got through your block. So IQ is a huge category for me. It's not necessarily weighted as much as maybe it should, but I also don't want to give credence to guys who are not necessarily effective. If I really think you are like supreme IQ, I also do blend that into the it factor. But, you do need to know where the ball is, because you're not playing the game of I'm trying to get past this block. It is I'm trying to stop the offense. How you stop the offense, most of the time, is getting through the block. But if you're not getting through the block to the ball, you're not really doing anything. So it's key to know where the ball is, because a lot of guys can, hone in on the block itself and not actually the play. Versatility, this is actually something that will not be factored into the grade category, but something that I still put down there so you guys get to have an understanding of, hey, these guys can kick to the inside, or these guys can play coverage. It's a nice little blend there for sure. But let's get into this. It's a long-winded way of being able to talk about these guys. I only watch players in all 22. Right now, through my 3 sources, I do not have UNC defensive tape. That's why I want to put this on here, because Cayman Rucker should be a top 15 to 10 edge rusher on my board. I want to put that out there. I think he will be arguably one of those guys who is a starter. He's a fantastic player. I do want to be able to emphasize that right now, because I'm not going to leave him off a list because he's not good. I'm leaving him off a list because I'm still waiting on tape, and I'm a little bit frustrated with it. When you're freelance, it's not very easy to do because their sources of all 22 are very limited or extremely, extremely expensive. And even with the extremely expensive options, not really fully there because copyright issues. So a lot of people do not like to be able to run the liability risk. Thank God for those who do. But Cayman Rucker is fantastic. Deep down, I wish he somehow found a way to return for Chapel Bill, but Cayman Rucker, I do think, will be a top 15 to 10 edge rusher on my board. And Tyler Barron as well. He's a really good player, someone who I've been a big fan of for the past 2.5 years now. And, landed in Miami. He's had upwards of a 20% pass rush win rate, and he's done a phenomenal job. So, again, waiting on Miami defensive tape. I don't know why. If we can get Miami offensive tape, I don't know why it's insane to expect Miami defensive tape. Apparently it is. But again, Tyler Barron will be in the final edge rusher rankings. I could not make this list without mentioning those 2 players there. There's a lot of other ones as well. Jared Ivey is next. So he is the first edge rusher that I'm talking about. He is 6'6" and 285 pounds. So he's a big guy. When you are that size, it's not going to be very easy to be a legit NFL edge rusher unless you are a really twitchy athlete. So there are some really good reps for Jared Ivey. I will be reading my report of him versus Florida, where you're going up against Austin Barber and Brennan Crenshaw Dixon. So at least you are going up against legitimate NFL talents. So I do want to see what that's all about. But, I do think that there are certain aspects to his game that are fun. Like, he ends up being able to win some pretty easy matchups. But I do think that when he goes up against NFL level talent, I do have my concerns. He did well versus LSU. I'll give him that credit, but I do think that it's not very translatable to the NFL, bottom line. But let's get into this report of him versus Florida. So, starting off the game, so I end up writing this for myself, not for you guys. You guys ended up saying you love it when I end up doing this, so it's not a super polished one. Basically, imagine if you're sitting next to me while we're watching a game. These are my takeaways. It's play by play. I don't go back and I don't retrospectively do things. Like, I will sit there and give you my honest opinion. Sometimes they cross each other, and so you guys get to see that internal argument in my own head as I'm finalizing my opinion, at least through a logical flow. So there we go. Let's get into this. So first off, I don't see a lot of push off the bat. Impact at the line of scrimmage, C-. So by the way, C is adequate. I also want to put that out there. People are going to get pissed, but C is adequate at the NFL level. So I think it's just a little bit under where it needs to be. But continuing on, I didn't see a lot of push off the get-go. He seemed to be a very big stunt guy. And what I mean by that is a lot of his success early in this game was sliding off blocks to the side, not necessarily going through people. And that didn't really do anything, because if you're just sliding across the line of scrimmage, you're not affecting a pass play. You're not affecting really a run play either, unless you're actually getting in the way of it, which he was not. I said not very enforceful versus the run. So he is somebody that I didn't really think was somebody who can really have that animalistic instinct. There's guys who are just ferocious, and I did not see that with Jared Ivey. Dude is an east-west movement merchant. So far, not much for one-on-one reps. So as I was talking about, moving side to side, not necessarily through somebody. He got absolutely mooed by Austin Barber on an outside zone. It was quite embarrassing. I said, woof, poor acceleration and long strides. He got embarrassed on another outside handoff. I ended up posting that over on my Twitter page, so feel free to follow me there. It'll be in the it will be a link in the link tree, so you guys don't need to even worry about the handle. So feel free to go check it out there. But that is a rep that you can see for yourself. He has delayed reactions on run plays. Ended up being a constant issue, as you could see by the IQ grade. Good pop on a pass rush rep. It took 100 strides to get there, though. So he ended up being quasi wide 9, and he basically ended up looking like Frozone, taking like the largest strides possible, and he like took a big full like energy charge to be able to push Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon. I remember this rep, so I do have my concerns there because it took him forever to get there to finally generate push, but at least you get to see that it is there. So continuing on, he got moved by tight ends in the run game. That was kind of an issue. They were kind of smaller tight ends too, I must admit. He got stunned by a long arm by Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon, which, to be fair, Crenshaw-Dixon knows he has really good arm length and he uses it very well. But I remember this. Jared Ivey literally was going in for a rush and got popped and literally froze. It was actually quite insane. Like, he did get actually stunned, which, for someone who is 285, you'd really hope they could push through that type of pop. But maybe Crenshaw-Dixon, I'm going to tackles next, will be someone who I really fall in love with. Seeing nearly zero effectiveness, even though he swipes hands, he just ends up swiping them and does nothing really beyond that. His best rep was versus a tight end so far. His motor is solid. I said he did not even disengage when a running back was right next to him. I ended up posting that clip as well for you to go check out. He has an initial pop with nothing else after. He did some weird shit to finally get a pressure. Definitely not translatable. I remember this. He did some weird juke on Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon. And it was like, I don't think any NFL tackle is going to fall for that. It's like having a beard when you're 250 pounds at 5'8". It's like, it might cover up the double chin. We know it's still there. It's not fooling anybody, just like that move. Not going to fool an NFL tackle. And, I mean, that's why Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon's not a first-round pick at the moment. But, continuing, his best pass rushing play was a swim on a lunging tight end. And I ended off noting that all of his good reps seemed to be versus the tight ends and not the offensive tackles. So I do think that it's like a little bit better than what I gave credit for. But Jared Ivey, I do think, really does have that lack of translatability. And I'm hoping I'm wrong on this one. I'll continue to reevaluate him as time goes on. But it certainly did give me some pause because it was like, not a good athlete. Not a super quick winner versus tackles, so I do have my concern versus whether he could even be on the interior of the defensive line. Then we got Elijah Roberts. As you guys know, I'm a Penn State, or actually I'm not a Penn State alum. I am a SMU alum. I'm reading my own notes here off the side of my board, but I'm an SMU alum. Love Elijah Roberts. He's been a big impact for us this entire year. But let's get into it. Versus Penn State, why I do believe that he is not necessarily translatable on the edge. You might be able to tell from his weight, probably not his long-term position. But ended off by saying this dude produces versus everyone. Not seeing a ton of acceleration off the bat. He tried to do a jump swim move. So, you're basically lunging and then trying to get a swim. So trying to get a better angle before making a move. Not seeing much as a pass rusher. He did have a swim move for disengagement. Some flashes of great upper body strength when he ends up throwing offensive linemen by. He has a good swim in a sack versus a guard. I ended up posting that as well on my X page for you guys to go check out. He ended up plowing the left tackle on his ass. I do remember this. I was like, oh, shit. It might have been the right tackle. But he ended up sitting somebody on their tush, and I was like, nice. Clearly not an NFL edge for his athletic level. He stumbled into a pressure on a long developing play. He has some flashes of push, but they're very inconsistent. He is a scrappy player, just not a good athlete. He had a massive lead on sealing the edge, and the running back still got around him. Bottom line, He's not built to be an NFL edge rusher as an athlete. If he drops 20 pounds, we might be seeing that, but I do think that his size was an asset in college, and it's going to be a massive liability in the NFL. Then we got Tyler Batty next. I really like Tyler Batty. Tyler Beatty's a fun player, and I ended up seeing him for the first time on a Brett Coleman tweet, so that's why I actually ended up grading him for this video, because I'm like, shoot, he seems really fun. And my bottom line takeaway for Tyler Batty is that I think he's going to be better in the NFL than he is in college, and I think he needs to just be used properly. We'll get to it. You'll hear it in my notes. He needs to be used properly, because I don't think there's a very good display of his capabilities in college, because I do think they used him awkwardly as a stand-up and as a defensive interior a lot. And it's just very, like, he is still very raw as an edge rusher. But let's talk about his game versus Kansas later in the year. So first off, he ends up looking past offensive linemen. It did end up being a little bit more inconsistent, but when I say looking past the offensive lineman, remember when I was talking about putting your blinders on and not being able to, essentially get past, focusing on the block shed and being able to look at the play? That's what I love about Tyler Batty. He ends up looking past the block quite a few times. He plays a lot of defensive interior reps. He ended up shooting a gap, but ended up getting pushed out of the run lane. I remember this. Like, he ended up shooting the gap between the guard and the tackle, and then I think it was a pulling tight end that ended up shoving him off course. So it was almost a massive play, but, I did see him on the ground, I think, a couple times during this game. Core strength might be a little bit of an issue, but let's continue on here. He has good tracking on outside zone runs. That's something that it was actually the case. That was the Brett Coleman tweet. It was an outside zone run, I believe, that he ended up, flashing on, and he does a really good job at that. And a lot of NFL teams like to run outside zone, so it is going to be valuable. He did such a good job using length and vision on said outside zone runs. He's definitely built to be an edge, because he does not have the level of awareness when he is on the interior of the defensive line the way he does as an edge. A little late on an option read, but he still ended up making the play. He did do another one of those moves where you do jump, but he was not very quick with it at all. He's not built to be in a 2-point stance, definitely a 3 or 4-point stance defensive lineman. Like I was talking about, they use this guy in stand-up or defensive interior way too much. Literally, the one play he's in a 3-point stance on the edge, he ends up blowing up the tackle on an outside zone rush. He literally ended up moving the tackle 5 yards back. Would like for him to have disengaged, but he still ended up blowing up the play. Big fan of that. He ended up doing it again on a pass rush and ended up pushing the offensive tackle. I ended up actually talking about this as well. Ended up posting this on my X page, being able to see him push the tackle and then end up going for a sack against Jaylen Daniels. But continuing on, tackle got his back on an inside zone run and ended up pushing him. I did not see him get away. Essentially, he was in a bad spot and then ended up pretty much being locked up on an inside zone run. He ended up biting on a quarterback option, leading to a larger gain. So he needs to just to be a little bit more decisive and maybe a little bit safer when you have someone like Jaylen Daniels, who is the guy who is, playing the option. He needs to lower his pad level overall. Good job disengaging on a tackle on a quarterback scramble, ending up leading to a sack. He's playing a lot of contain. His cool kit, though, is lacking overall. He did end up, I ended up posting this rep as well. He flashed the rip move and ended up getting a pressure from it while also coming from wide 9. So Tyler Batty has a lot of potential, but I do think BYU did not have a strong influence on his NFL translatability. I think that he will actually have a better NFL career if teams give him the shot. Then we got, I think it's Dennis Sutton. I always say Denis, but I'm going to trust you guys. Dennis Sutton. This is going to be a hot one. People love Dennis, and then you see the grades. I still think that he is adequate or good in every category, I think, except for some pass rush consistency. And that's awesome. Think about that for a second. I just want you to think about that. He is, first off, 3.25 points away from being someone in a rotation, should be getting 20 reps a game. 3.25 points? That is ridiculous at edge 19. Like, think about that. We have so many edges that good edge rushers, like I think Denis would end up going, or it is Denis. Denis might end up going like he'd probably be edge 10 in most edge classes. That's how good this one is. So I want you guys to understand that as well. This is just a really, really good edge class, and it's very tight. You will see there are literally, I think, 4 edge rushers, or maybe 3, that have a 66.75 grade. So he's essentially a top 15 edge rusher for me. Such a good class. But let's talk about his game versus Oregon. He is very solid get off. His top speed seems slightly limited. Takes mid to poor angles on ball carriers. He's in a very heavy rotation. He ended up getting a pressure by grabbing Cornelius's wrist and then moving by. I did love that. Cornelius went for a full extension, and Dennis Sutton ended up grabbing his wrist, moving it out of the way, and then just going forward. I absolutely love that. I do think that's why I think his mechanics definitely can improve overall. We're talking about angles and timing and all that, but he does have some really good moves in there. He ended up flashing a spin move, which is good, but it didn't end up being super duper effective. He has a weird... I ended up mistyping some things here, but he has a weird kind of engagement where he tucks his arms rather than using full length. So, so he ends up, rather than using the length that God gave him, that he ends up actually not using length properly at points. And I really do think he could be a lot more effective because he is an athletic freak, using as much of his arm length as possible, because I think a long arm to Dennis Sutton's game could revolutionize him to the point where he is legitimately a top 10 edge rusher in this class for me. But I do want to see that a lot more. He does have some solid bull rushes overall, hence why it's a C+ impact of the line of scrimmage. But bottom line, Dennis Sutton is an absolute savage. I mean, talking about that interception as well versus Notre Dame. He is extremely versatile. I love that. I don't know why he has a C+ on versatility grade. That might be a typo on me, but regardless, I mean, to be fair, he shouldn't be playing coverage. He shouldn't be playing defensive interior. C+, being above adequate in the NFL for versatility is respectable. But, Dennis Sutton is going to be someone who I think in the hands of someone like Dan Quinn could do so many great things. And I'm excited to see him continue to progress and reach his potential because I do not think he is remotely close. Then we got Ashton Gillette here at number 18. And we'll talk about his game versus Clemson, but this is someone who I've been a big fan of in terms of like the way he's played in college, but I have been more skeptical about the role he will play in the NFL. So let's talk about him real quick. Versus Clemson, he ended up actually building a lot of momentum and ended up ending the season very well. So he starts off by having a good use of the long arm. Would love a bit more forward movement off the snap. So he does, a lot of players do this, I don't know why. When they take their first step, it's not a very forward first step. It's like more of I'm going to see how the offensive lineman reacts and then go. It is very interesting, but I do, especially for Ashton Gillette's overall athleticism, would really love to see him be a little bit more assertive and forward. He had a smooth spin move after having a long arm, but he just does not have the athleticism to really make it work on a consistent level in the NFL. He annihilated Blake Miller's anchor and drove him into the quarterback, but he did not disengage to make the sack. He ended up disengaging later with Tristan Lee, but we'll get to that in a second. He ended up swiping the arms of Blake Miller for another pressure. He is patient when he is holding the backside of the defensive line. Definitely more of a kamikaze type than finding the ball. So that's where that IQ grade starts to dip a little bit. I do think that he does try to focus on the block a little bit more than he should, especially given the fact that he can drive through players. I really would love for him to be looking for the ball because he doesn't need to focus on driving a player. He just has that innate ability, that great strength, that I think that if his head was more on a swivel, he'd be even more effective. So maybe that's something that could easily grow him in the NFL, but we'll continue on here. He bit hard on an option, leading to a big quarterback gain. He's just not very aware of where the ball is. He also looks a bit tired. I did see that. There were some concerns in the middle of the game of him looking a little bit gassed. Arm length might be a concern, but he does use his arm length very well. He does a good job in space, but when he engages in a block, he puts blinders on and tries to win the block over making the play. He pushed Tristan Lee into the quarterback for a sack. That is also on Twitter, so feel free to go look that up. He has solid angles in space, which helps with his lack of movement skills. He has some flashes of excellence in the run game, but they do need to be more consistent. He can tend not to utilize his length properly on combination moves, leading to him being in a disadvantaged situation both in the pass and the run. He needs to learn how to take advantage over leverage, because Blake Miller ended up leaning very far forward to counter his leg drive, and Gillette should have been able to rip him to the ground. So basically, Blake Miller's normally like this when he's blocking Gillette. He ended up going like this to basically be able to counter it out. Gillette should be able to push him down and get by, because if you're that nose over the toes, like, your only strength in that, and like your only counter in that case as an offensive lineman, is to a bull rush. You do not lean super far forward if someone's going to be pushing you to the side, because you are not in your proper base. So I really do want him to have that awareness to be able to do that. But continuing on here, he has a solid long arm to spin, especially for his size, but not much beyond that in the bull rush. As he gets tired, he compensates with false steps, and it just wastes movement and time. Again, he needs to be a lot more decisive, a little bit more cognizant, and I think he could be a really big difference maker when deployed on certain, especially pass rushing downs. You might say like, oh, he's too slow to do it, but imagine having him be the edge that you have on a stunt. Like, you'll have maybe a slot corner blitz, or you might be able to have a linebacker who lines up in the A gap and then goes around. Like, you might be able to use Ashton Gillette to blow up the edge of the pocket and allow a much more faster edge rusher to get by, or much faster rusher to get by. So I would love to be able to see that, because you can't just go one-on-one versus Ashton Gillette and like pretty much assume effectiveness from your offensive tackle. Ashton Gillette is going to blow up your pocket, but it's a question is he going to be able to get there in time? So that's kind of the bigger issue. Then we got Landon Jackson here at 17. A lot of people have him as high as the first round. I'm not there yet. Again, you're looking, is he inadequate in any single category? Remember, C is adequate. Like, I'm a tough cookie, but C is adequate. And he is adequate or good in everything. Just want to put that out there. He is really solid, but this is just the wrong edge class to be really solid. So let's talk about his game versus Texas, because a lot of these players I did grade versus Texas. So starting off, he had a nice job with an inside fake leading to an outside rip move. I do really love that about Landon Jackson. He has some of his moves that are very polished. He had a good flash with using his leverage, but his bend is a bit rough. Of course, he is 280 pounds. Looking past the offensive lineman in the run, so solid job being able to identify, or like not being kamikaze into the offensive lineman in front of you. He has been on the ground a few times already. I did see that. I mean, you're 6'7", 280. It's not going to be super easy with the leverage to not be on your ass. I do see that kind of being an issue, though. He was able to chase down, or he ends up chasing down the ball carrier from the back of the play. So I do love the fact that even though he doesn't need to, he still has the motor to be able to push forward and, do things that are not required of him. I want him to take a bit more of an assertive first step and go forward. He's on the ground again. Good job with outside fake to inside swim, but he did not have the bend for the sack, but he did end up pushing the quarterback out of the pocket. He did a good job pushing Kelvin Banks deeper and doing the same move, ended up getting a sack on that. He did end up missing a jet sweep after that. So I do think Landon Jackson has the flashes that you do really love, and I think that's why people have him so high. I'm more of a consistency guy, because I think in the NFL, you do need to be a lot more consistent than flashy in college. I think you can get away with it a lot more. But Landon Jackson's adequate in every single category. If you want somebody to just be reliable and have him as like a third or fourth edge rusher, by all means, Landon Jackson's a good guy. It's just, again, I'm a huge fan of certain players in this class that push guys down artificially. He's a damn good player. So let's continue on here, though. This is going to piss people off. Shamar Stewart. I love Shamar. I do. But I don't know why there's this level of glazing of Shamar Stewart. I do not understand it. He's a big, fast, 290-pound edge rusher. That's awesome. He has so much to work on. Unbelievably large amounts of work to be able to do. And people will just criticize you left, right, and center for it. And it makes me feel like people are really disingenuous. Like, it's gotten to the point where, I mean, the NFL, you have this with guys like Justin Herbert and stuff, to where if you like legitimately criticize them on a normal basis, you are looked at as a hater, as someone who, like, you basically activate a cult. So far this year, like Walter Nolan, Shamar Stewart, actually Walter Nolan to a much less degree, Shamar Stewart and Shedeur Sanders. Those are the two that have the biggest cults. So I already know enough people are going to be talking shit in the comment section on this. But it's okay for people to understand that there needs to be a lot more work done. And he has an amazing, amazing profile for you to develop. That's why 60 or 70 to 64 is that developmental tier. And then below that is going to be practice squad / backup for sure. So he is a developmental player. I think we can all agree that he is a developmental player. But he is unbelievably raw. He is a ridiculous athlete. He's unbelievably raw. Let's talk about his game, though. We'll actually go versus Texas. I was going to read you guys both Missouri and Texas, but Missouri was earlier in the season. We'll go versus Texas, where I ended up actually boosting his grade a little bit more. So, starting out versus Texas, he's doing some weird vertical chop steps rather than going forward. Once again, I mean, like, I swear, with the offensive line class coming into the year, all of them leaned way too far forward. They did not actually have proper balance. With these edge rushers, be more assertive. Go forward, man. But my issue with Shamar is that he takes a lot of false steps. We'll be talking about that as well. Out of a 2-point stance, he has ridiculous acceleration for 290 pounds. Randomly gets deflected and redirects. He ended up being redirected away from the pocket. I remember this. He ended up going actually for the interior of the offensive lineman, and the guard ended up pushing him. And rather than, pretty much either holding his ground and, being able to readjust, he ended up bouncing away and trying to get around the tackle, but he didn't actually get around the tackle. He just ended up going wider and wider and wider. And I'm like, that's not how you do it. But continuing on, would love a lot more commitment to contact. He almost braces and slows up. That is something that I did realize a lot with Shamar. I think there is so much untapped potential. The fact that it's a B-, which is still good, in an impact on the line of scrimmage is ridiculous. You are an elite athlete who is strong as hell. I don't know why he's reserved to, as Marshawn Lynch would say, run through a motherfucker's face. Like, you should be doing that, and I wish he did it more consistently, because it's very inconsistent that he flashes that. But a lot of false steps. He literally swatted the air. You guys can go see this on X. I ended up saying that he ended up beating John Cena in a block because he literally was like this, swatting the air. Not the tackle, not the hands, the air. And this is Cam Williams, who's now been exposed by like better edge rushers. Just like, I mean, man, like, it really was like, dude, are you afraid of committing and going balls to the wall and running through somebody? Some delayed reactions on runs. He just said just going to be so real. He is not doing jack shit. And he has all the potential to be a game wrecker. That's why I have him as an all-D clearance version of Myles Garrett. Some delays, we ended up already reading that. Going to need to have a good Senior Bowl to convince me of his ability to impact early. He jumped a gap and ended up missing the rusher, and that's how ended off the notes there. So Shamar Stewart, ridiculous potential, horrible floor, because he just is afraid to be himself. It's so weird. Like, he's like afraid of being able to engage at the rate that his body, his athleticism, what God gave him said he should be able to do. So I will say I was very disappointed with Shamar Stewart, because I even saw him versus Bowling Green. And yeah, he tripped a couple of times, but you should be able to absolutely annihilate every tight end that you go up against if you are more athletic and also 60 pounds heavier than they are. He did not. I don't care if you trip. It was every single play that it was underwhelming. And I chose the later part of the year where they picked up momentum. I could have talked about Missouri, where he did not do nearly as well. But I wanted to give you guys that one. I think he has so much potential. I love what he's going to do. But if you are looking for someone to be an impact player next year, this is not your guy. This is someone, if you have 3 years of patience, you might get a super stud. I'm going to tell you how it is. I love you guys. I love Shamar. But he is not ready to make an impact day one. Josiah Stewart is there at pick number 15. Not pick number 15, excuse me. Spot number 15. He had a fantastic year. 27% pass rush win rate. Ludicrous. Ludicrous, I say. But I do think it was a little bit, I don't know where the 27% came from. I see a lot of edge rushers winning at a higher rate than that. But, I did give him a +1 for that. I think he's a very good player. He ended up actually barely boosting his grade from preseason. So he was at number 8 preseason and ended up boosting his grade. Again, that's why I want to emphasize this is someone who probably, I have hiccups now, is somebody who, if I didn't add in certain players who were dark horse players I fell in love with, he'd be a top 10 edge rusher in this class. I do want to emphasize that. This is like a normal top 10 edge. So, again, want to emphasize that right there. Let's talk about his game versus Oregon. We could toss in Illinois as well because Oregon was relatively shorter. Illinois might be a little longer. Solid proactive defense. He has a good get off. Length appears to be a bit short. He has some reps with some good push, but he's not disengaging. If he disengaged after the initial bull rush, I could see him truly shining. He has missed 2 sacks. I do see he has an issue with his bend, but his agility is very surprising at 245 for the lack of it. Looking past offensive linemen in the run, some solid zone instincts as well in coverage. He missed tackles are the big issue for me. I really did not get a great read on. I did not really get a great read on someone with such high stats. So basically, I was saying the stats didn't add up with what I was actually watching. So let's talk about Illinois as well because I was like, well, these are against easier tackles, but let's see. Better graded games, so let's see. Brother is getting locked down. So off the bat, J.C. Davis was locking him down. Good bull rush on Melvin Priestley. He's having success, but only versus Melvin Priestley, who I think is probably going to be a guard. First pressure was versus Priestley, or first pressure was also versus Priestley, and he ended up was rolled into by the quarterback. It wasn't really him generating the pressure. Finally got a pressure versus J.C. Davis. Not seeing him win even versus tight ends. I don't know where this greater than 20% pass rush win rate comes from. He's getting cooked by mid-offensive tackles in college. He did end up missing another tackle. His best rep in the game was versus the run versus a tight end. Ended up low-key being a tight end merchant. But it was surprising. You see 6'1", 245 with a 27% pass rush win rate, and you're like, oh, okay, so this guy's going to be an elite pass rusher. I did not see that as a translatable trait. I hope I'm wrong, but the crazy thing is, I would almost invert the majority of these statistics if you just ended up saying, hey, Alex, 27% pass rush win rate, 245 pounds, probably going to be a later day 2 guy. I would say, okay, he's going to have a high pass rush grade, a low run defense and impact the line of scrimmage, a good mechanics grade, and maybe a little bit of a lower IQ grade. It's literally flipped. It's ridiculous. So, Josiah Stewart, I do like that floor then because, hey, at the very minimum, you could actually be an effective early down edge rusher even at 245 because he's 6'1". But we'll see what happens in the draft. I do want to see his arm length for sure. Kyle Canard is next. And Kyle Canard, I'm going to read 2 games because I'll read you a recent game. Well, actually, the game I ended up falling in love with him. And then also a recent game, which is LSU early on in Missouri, which is later on. So Kyle Canard, though, someone who also is a really solid player. Again, 69.5 grade is someone who I do believe would be a normal top 10 edge rusher in most classes. And he kind of has gotten prospect fatigue just because he ended up getting a little bit banged up throughout the year. But LSU was pretty banged up. So starting out with the LSU game, he looks way feistier than he did in the Alabama game. The Alabama game I did not like because he was post-injury coming back. Good sack on a tight end block shed, which, to be fair, CJ Dupre, pretty damn good blocker. Completely different player than he was in the Alabama game, taking advantage of poor angles by Will Campbell from wide 9. He's literally a different player. I was very let down by the Alabama game, if you can't tell. He had a great beeline to the running back for a tackle for loss. I ended up literally forgetting the Bama game because it's the player when he's healthy. So he still can take better angles when trying to bend. Will Campbell's doing a solid job overall cutting off the outside bend. It was a night and day difference. But this is the game that I wanted to talk about versus Missouri, because we're talking about Armand Membu here. And also, I'm trying to remember the other tackle's name. Funnily enough, I actually had a class with him here at SMU. I actually ended up having a sport management class with him, but I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head. He does a pretty good job as well. A nice out fake that he ended up making inside. So he faked outside, ended up doing a nice job going to the inside. He can shed the opposite way of the play. So I did see this. The play was going to the opposite side, and he ended up shedding outside. It's like sometimes the play was actually a run coming to his side, and he shedded to the wrong side. It's just like look past the line of scrimmage, please. Like, look to the runner. But I actually did have a little bit of an issue with that right there. He ended up randomly tackling air. That's a joke. He ended up tripping, but ended up doing that as well. He responded on that tweet too. I ended up talking about John Cena again. He randomly sheds like he's a pass rusher when the play is a run play. So I ended up realizing this. He pretty much does the same exact thing when he does a pass rush as he does when he defends the run. He pretty much goes upfield and tries to get around the tackle. I really was quite surprised by it. It was a little bit weird. He ended up making an inside move when the run was to his side, and he broke the edge seal. So, run coming this side. He tried probably to learn from the last mistake, went inside, and the run was outside. Again, you just got to be aware of where the ball is and where the player is moving. He has still a solid get off. He has flashes of excellence, but they're very inconsistent. Does not transfer power to speed or speed to power enough. He can end up getting stonewalled by tight ends as well. He ended up biting on an RPO, but the thing I do like about Kyle is that when he knows the play is a pass, like when you are in actual true pass sets, he is somebody who will absolutely go like batshit crazy, and he can end up making a really, really good play against the quarterback. But I do think that, again, really want him to be a little bit more aware of where the ball is. Outside of that, every other category looks really solid to me. A very good pick nonetheless. Princely Mellen is next. He's also a very good edge rusher. Again, that shows how damn good this edge class is. But let's talk about him versus University of Kentucky, because technically those are two solid college tackles. Want to be able to look at it. He ended up also having one of his lowest grades, so I do like to watch players when they struggle a little bit more, because if I like you when you struggle, probably going to like you when you do well. And I think the NFL is a pretty brutal league, and you're going to struggle. So if you can still succeed while struggling, it's a good sign going forward. So I would like for him to attempt more moves when initially shut down. So I said he has a pretty solid overall performance, but I would like for him to do a little bit more and continue through when he ends up getting shut down. He has shown great get off. I don't know why he is not doing it. And it's weird because at Florida, the first time I evaluated him, really poor get off. Then last year, flashed a lot better get off. And this year, he was back to having a pretty poor get off. So I really do have an issue right there. But continuing on, he ended up struggling to get off a tight end. Just seems to be a bit athletically limited. A lot of kamikaze shoulder drives, so he ends up just ramming his shoulder into either a pull blocker or whoever is in front of him. Either this tight end is goated as a blocker, he does not shed well. He's not doing a great job with the usage of his length. He lucked into a tackle for loss. Clean win on the right tackle. He has much more effectiveness versus the right tackle than the left. And I think that is kind of true. I think Princely might have a little bit of a side specificity. I'm not sure. But at the same time, Princely is someone who I still think has a really solid floor. All of my comments were in the light of him being a mid-first round pick at the time as well. So keep that in mind. He's a very solid player. I mean, look at the stats. I mean, I will say that that specific game, he did struggle. But overall, I really do think that, he is someone who has good strength. He has good push on the pocket. He has those moves that you're looking for. He has that ankle flexion that you are looking for, but it is being slow off the line. It is kind of being a little bit more inconsistent. It is kind of not being able to have that extra oomph when you do get shut down, that relentlessness that I do see in other edge rushers that I have a concern with Princely. But honestly, for him, I would love for him to go to a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, because they don't develop players very well. I could see them learning to use his athletic profile well, and then allowing him to use the polish he already has. And because they haven't been able to make it work with a lot of players who don't necessarily have that polish. Then we got Mike Green at 12. This is going to piss people off, but Mike Green, there's very limited tape of him, so I'll put that out there. I watched him versus Ohio State, but I did end up coming away with thinking he's less translatable than what people give him credit for. But the thing about Mike Green is, even though he's 12, I still think he's phenomenal, right? He is a top 70 player on my board as edge 12. Like, this is just such a weird class, because you see edge 12, you're like, what the fuck? And if he gets taken in the first, I'm like, okay. Like, that's insane. Like, it's insane. Mike Green is very, very good. Like, very good. I want to put that out there. Very good. And you see, like, there is a lot to his game I really love, but I also don't think Marshall taught him to be as NFL translatable as what he's going to be in the NFL. So I really do see him taking a meteoric rise in the NFL. This is just a player he is now, and someone who I'm perfectly still happy with him going in the first. So, again, look at the grades, and you will see this is an elite foundation. But this is going to be a little bit of shorter notes, because you'll see why. He's twitchy. He ended up going primarily against the tight end. He had some flash of some good hand technique. And I said, I don't know if this really translates to the NFL. His wins are not really stacking up like NFL wins. And then he ended off the game with a beautiful spin on Josh Fryer for a sack. Ended up being subbed out for the rest of the game. But, again, short, sweet. I do think this guy has a ridiculous athletic profile. I think the flashes are absolutely ludicrous. I think we were robbed of being able to see him versus some legitimate higher level talent. And like outside of the Ohio State game, where he ended up having his best success versus Josh Fryer, which pretty much, you and me could end up having success versus Josh Fryer. Like, I do want to see a little bit more than that. But 17 sacks on the year, absolutely phenomenal. That's why I give him that +1 it factor. But this is a great profile to build an amazing player from. I want to see it be a little bit more like translatable, though. I really did not see the wins as being necessarily something that could work versus NFL tackles, but I do think that, you have the profile that you're looking for if you're trying to get someone who could end up working against NFL tackles, and that is ridiculous at edge 12 in the class. At number 11, we got Donovan Zaku. Zaku's awesome. I got to see him literally 2 feet away from me when I was at SMU. It was ridiculous. He's a really fun player. And, just definitely somebody that, that first step was kind of my biggest issue with him. We'll go through 2 games, Missouri, because, again, I love being able to bring up Missouri. And then also SMU, because I got to see him in person here. But let's talk about the game versus Missouri. I would like some more explosiveness off the ball. Nice double swim on a tight end and then a running back. So he did it twice in a row. He has power in his arms. He is very powerful. Remember, a B+ is like damn good. So like anything above like a B is like really freaking good. But let's get back to it. He tries to get low, but he fails noticeably a lot. So I do see him on the ground a little bit more than I should. Noticeably worse versus tackles than tight ends, which, to be fair, happens to the best of us. It's also versus some really good tackles. Some good reps plagued by poor balance. Nice cross chop for a sack. Pretty meh game overall. I do see some big issues, but he also has some massive wins too. Let's go to the SMU game. Top speed is limited when he ended up trying to defend a jet sweep. Good push with length. He can swim to win. Or he had a quick swim move that ended up leading to a big win. He takes a charge step. So basically, when you're coming off the line, there are guys who just go boop, and there are guys who go whoop, boop. And so it's almost like he charges up to go, and I'm like, timing's key in the NFL. So definitely have my issue right there. Hence why you see the get off's not horrible, but again, it's noticeably worse than some of his other positive traits. His bend is not as good as I remember. He has good patience on RPO plays. Great block shed through on a jet sweep, but he did not have the athleticism to finish the play. He has a nice quick win, but missed the sack due to a poor wrap up. I think I ended up posting that as well. doing all the right things, but either lacks athleticism or tackling strength to finish the play. Good long arm would like a slightly better leverage angle, so he stood a little bit too far up when he did so. He does a good job of being patient and present on option plays. Honestly, a really glowing review for Donovan Zaku overall, especially for someone from Boston College. I could totally see him going back to Jeff Hafley and having a great career. I mean, again, he's just not going to be a super twitched up athlete, and that's okay. There's a role for these guys in the NFL who can push the pocket, who are elite technicians and are very polished everywhere. Like, he's going to be a pretty safe bet that he's going to be a success. Maybe he's not going to be a superstar, but he is a damn good player. So a big fan of Zaku right there. Jack Sawyer's next. People are going to find a reason to get mad at this, but again, I want you guys to realize that he's adequate in only one category or two categories, and he's great or good in like every other one. He is a damn good player. Again, we're talking about a class where these guys are legitimate first-round players. If you take Jack Sawyer in the first, I am not complaining. He is a top 50 player on my board. Just keep that in mind. I already know. I could hear it. Oh my God, you got Jack Sawyer's edge 10. You're such an idiot. He's a top 50 player on the board, bro. Like, you'll see. There are some guys who I'm crazy high on. So he's probably realistically, like for most people's boards, I'd call him an edge 6 or 7. I just am a little bit crazy about certain other players. But let's talk about his game versus Oregon. Actually, Oregon 1 and Oregon 2. So I want to be able to talk about both for Jack Sawyer specifically because I did see some really good growth. So he whiffed on a cutback this is the first Oregon game. Good initial pop, good length usage, would like quicker processing. Nice bull rush on Johnny Cornelius. He flashes some good technique, but applying it has been pretty mid so far. Timing of moves are just off. He does have a big lack of bend. But let's see how he does versus Oregon. So I saw of him as like probably someone who's taking a step up every time I've watched him. But he's someone who took another step in that first Oregon game. He took even another step here versus Oregon the second time. He kind of kamikazes when sealing the edge. He's a smooth mover at his size. As I say that, he looks stuck in quicksand on a reverse play, but I mean, again, he's solid overall. We ended up seeing it on that return. He literally did nothing versus Josh Conerly, which, to be fair, Josh Conerly is some people's tackle 1. Connor Rogers, I'm talking to you. So, Conerly's a freaking beast, though. Man, Cornelius looks good versus him. Not really a good sign. Ended up changing as the game went on. He swatted the pass. He ended up doing a spin move. So, he flashed spin move. Like to see the toolkit there. Not seeing the prowess people see in him. Finally pushed Cornelius to the boundary. On his boundary shoulder and ended up getting a sack. The spin worked out this time. Another swat. Josh Conerly ended up shutting him down. But I ended up improving his grade a little bit in certain other categories to be able to represent how well he played versus Texas. That game is not out right now for all 22, but I still think that Oregon is a perfectly translatable game. I mean, he's a damn good edge rusher, man. I do think he still does need to work a bit in his pass rush. I think he took advantage of a pretty poor Cam Williams, and Cam Williams who still needs to develop a lot, but he's an adequate NFL edge rusher as a pass rusher, and he's a really good one who can play early downs and has that upside to be able to grow even more as time progresses. Now let's talk about JT. JT, we'll talk about the first Oregon matchup because I honestly thought he did well in both, but let's not make this a 2-hour episode. Yeah, great long arm in the run. A great long arm in the run, ended up looking past the offensive lineman to see the ball carrier and redirect while holding the edge. He even ended up making the tackle while tracking it down. So the run was coming to his side. He long armed the tackle, or it might have been Ferguson, which Ferguson's a good blocker too. I ended up realizing that. But he ended up looking past the offensive lineman. The running back redirected. He ended up going down the offensive line and still made the tackle from the backside. I loved that play. It's my favorite play from JT Tumala. But he ended up having a really good chop and bend. Unreal start to this game. He got his hand on the ball carrier pretty much every single rep. Elite start to this game. Edge 1 to 3 material. Ended up slipping. I mean, we ended up falling in love with some more people. Consistent use of length. Have yet to truly see him not know where the ball is. It said this is a really good chess battle, or it said some real good chess battles with him and Conerly. Man, this is where I started falling in love with Josh Conerly too. He definitely cooled off a bit, but still consistently impacts the play. He ended up biting on a quarterback keeper. Overall impressed with his progression. I'm an absolute fan of JT Tuimoloau. It is nothing against Jack Sawyer. I just think JT Tuimoloau has really flourished into the player that he belongs, or he is supposed to be. And, I think that if he just continues to improve his consistency the way he's done year after year after year, we could truly end up seeing someone who is a legitimate guy who has earned every single down that he starts. And right now, I still think that he did. Then we got Antoanpow Ryland. No freaking clue why this guy is here. But, I literally went in studying I think he's going to be edge 20. That was my thought process. I went in being like, this guy sucks. I didn't think that. But I was like, this guy is going to be he's viewed as consensus edge 15 to 25, right? And I went in thinking that, and I'm like, you know what? Let's watch his worst game this year versus Miami. Because I ended up saying this verbatim on here. He did too well versus the Clemson offensive tackles for me to study him versus the Clemson offensive tackles. That's pretty remarkable because both those guys are good offensive tackles too. But Rivers and Maui Goa are good players as well. This is his worst graded game. So keep that in mind. He graded really well. Really, really well from his worst game. So this is his notes versus Miami. Great push on Maui Goa off the bat. He failed to spin versus a guard, but it was so weird because he started off as a linebacker. They used him weirdly as it was so funny because they would pretty much have 3 guys on the line of scrimmage, and he would be literally in between the linebackers in the defensive line. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Really weird. Really weird. But regardless, he has great get off. He collapsed too quickly and then gave up the edge seal versus an outside run. I feel like he's still putting it together because he can get stunned. Then he ends up getting back in the game. So he ends up, pretty much getting locked down, and he almost has a moment to think and then starts getting back to it. So I do think that's something that he's going to continue to improve on as time goes on. He has remarkable power for his athleticism. Good bend to push Cam up. So he ended up having good bend, ended up pushing Cam up into the pocket. He could disengage a little earlier, but he has excellent push. Another spin that he ended up flashing, but something about it looks great and just does not translate. So he's definitely working on still applying the proper timing and angles for the spin move. Continuing on, though, arm length is a little bit questionable. I want him to be a re-anchor buster more because I think he really can, but he does not fully commit. So similar, I'm trying to remember who I was talking about earlier. It might have been Tyler Batty, but basically they can pop an offensive tackle off their initial anchor, but they don't fully commit to the point where offensive tackles can then re-anchor versus them. So basically you go toe-to-toe versus an offensive lineman, you win, but it almost is like you win and then slow up and then they stop and re-anchor. I want to see him be able to continue that momentum because I really do think he has it. So that's what I meant right there. Clean win for a huge sack. Ended up posting that on X. Tracking down Ward from behind, so you just see the athleticism there as well. He just floats around. He has such good movement skills. He has such a solid conversion of speed to power. He called out a defensive lineman for being out of position. I love seeing guys being able to make sure guys are in the right spot. He had a stupid quick win versus an offensive guard. He dropped into coverage. Really good player in his worst game. I love it. This is a guy who deserves to be an every down starter in the NFL. He was just someone who I consistently loved, even when he was at his worst. This is a player who I'm going to stamp my approval on. He's a top 32 player for me. I'm going to stick on it. Jaylen Walker's next, but I have a big asterisk here because I think he's even better as a linebacker. That's why he's a top 10 player for me. But I do think he's a pure edge rusher, which he has not developed remotely enough yet. He is going to be a little bit more on the, still a really good player, but not necessarily to the degree that people are thinking at the moment. I still see there's a massive level of upside in his game that he definitely is going to be. He's definitely going to be a real special player, but I do think it would be criminal to take him away from being able to be a linebacker as well. So I put a lot of teams right there that could probably use him as both. So let's talk about the game versus Texas. I started out by saying he has a here's Johnny kind of rush from the linebacker, basically just bursting through and his like head popped through between like the offensive linemen. Thought that was quite entertaining to see. Excellent transition from covering a running back in man coverage to disengaging and tackling a scrambling quarterback. I ended up posting that clip as well. Brother bull rushes guards. So I do love that about Jaylen Walker. He does have pretty much no chill. He will be willing to just go full ham on an offensive guard and do a good job at it. Great job evading a tackle on a screenplay for a solo tackle in space. Another play that I ended up posting. A low-key better as a linebacker. Ended up being that way. Could have a little better leg drive post initial contact or just maintain it a bit better. Do you see a trend with these edge rushers? That's the case. He got logged down by Kelvin Banks. Does a good job maximizing his length and taking advantage of poor angles. He's used as a spy a lot. So bottom line, glowing review of Jaylen Walker. I just think that he might be even better, like near a blue chip linebacker grade. So really good overall ranking of him. He is just somebody who I do have a ton of love for. Someone who I think should have some pass rushing presence. Just some linebacker reps. I would say Frankie Luvu, who was, I believe, a second-team All-Pro this year, is a very good comp for him, which is massive praise. Mykel Williams is next. I really like my comp for him. His ceiling is Danielle Hunter, but I think his floor is pretty much like what you're getting off the bat is pretty much a cheaper version of Danielle Hunter with the legitimate, like not bullshit potential, legitimate potential to be Danielle Hunter. Like it felt right when I thought about it. Danielle Hunter, 6'5", 263 coming out of LSU. Like, it just feels perfect for me. But let's get into it. Mykel is someone who I really did not like off the bat. I thought that, I loved him from the All-American high school game, right? I thought he was fantastic, and I thought he did not develop remotely enough coming into this year. Like, I thought he was a developmental guy below Shamar Stewart's grade, by the way. So keep that in mind as well. Like, that's what I'm saying. Shamar Stewart is like Mykel Williams to me. I think next year he could take a massive step up or something like that. But Mykel showed a lot more like flashes of technique. I'll just put that there. But regardless, Mykel has taken so many steps up this year. And the problem was that he had an injury early on, a high ankle sprain. So it's good to see versus Notre Dame that he had this level of success because he actually did better versus Texas, I believe, than he did versus Notre Dame. So he ended up having a ball swat off the bat, looking past the defender versus the run, flashing much better push this year than last. He flashed a good swim move, good use of length, but it appears to be out-lengthed by others, which is weird because he's uplifted for his arm length. Those tackles might just be absolute beasts, all I know. Flashing better run anchor than he did last year, doing a solid job of taking advantage of weak angles. He can be very ferocious when he wants to be. He can bench the offensive lineman off the line. That's one of my favorite things about Mykel. He could be completely stagnant still and move the offensive lineman backwards. That is ridiculous power. But continuing on. He can get in a habit of kind of chopping his feet in place and not driving forward when he does not get initial success. That's something I do have an issue with. Kind of just like fully commit, go full power, see what happens. He can slow up randomly at points when it's obvious he can make a strong push. He is the recipient of most of the double teams. Could be a bit more consistent when looking past the blocker versus the run. Honestly, not a bad game at all. And this was a poorly graded game. I'm a really big fan of Mykel Williams now. I really do think that if he goes to the right situation, he easily could end up being Danielle Hunter, which is a legitimate top 10 to 15 edge rusher in the NFL. Like, you can get that value. And so if he goes top 10, I don't care. I think that's fine. Like, he is that, like, if he goes to the right system. Like, Ejiro Evero, I don't know if I trust him, but I feel like I'd want to give him a shot. So, Mykel Williams, someone who I really do like. Then, let's go on to Nick Scorton. And you might say, Scorton at 5, I have two players who are, one of them's not even actually pretty much an edge rusher. The other one is someone who I'm ludicrously high on. So he's kind of an edge 3. Keep that in mind. Let's talk about him. Actually, I want to be able to spend a little bit more time on Nick Scorton. Let's talk about him versus Missouri versus Texas as well, because you see an early mid-game look and then an end of the year look where actually he had a bad game. So Missouri, Good push and length, but he needs to seal the edge on a wide zone play. Surprisingly lets up before contact. Hope that changes. Missed landing his hands. Woof. Membu took his ass out of the play. That's just because Membu's a fucking savage. Great tackle for loss pushing through Armand Membu. Bull rush has been the most effective, and he has a lot of hesitation steps or false steps for someone who is not overly nimble. He has lost track of the ball a couple of times now. He has some really bad losses. He had a flash of a quick spin move. He whiffed on a running back. The timing of these moves are just not right. Bull rush and spin move have been the most effective overall. He heated up as the game went on, but really slow start. Overall, some very promising reps, but far from consistent enough to love over these high-end rushers who are improving each year. But I lost a little faith in him, and he ended up bouncing back versus UT. It was one of his worst graded games. It was like a 41 defensive grade. But let's talk about it nonetheless. He has a bad game. Let's see why. Good job identifying the play action, so he didn't bite on the play action. Great push and assist versus great push and assist, and he added a tackle versus the run. Or great push and assisted tackle versus the run. Jesus, I can't read for shit. Versus the run on the other side of the line of scrimmage. He flashed the spin move, wasn't successful. Really solid agility and movement skills for his size. Good run IQ, so he finally started flashing it again. Great job stopping a bubble screen, blowing up the rundowns. Bull rushed Cam, but needs to combo it with a move because he did not get a pressure with it. I do think that is a particular skill of NFL edge rushers, and actually good NFL edge rushers, I should say, is that when you make your initial move, especially a bull rush, and you get their anchor to just knock their anchor out, make another move. They're panicking inside their head. And so if you can combine it with another move, that's how you have legitimate success. But continuing on, flash them bend, but Gunnar Helm did a good job blocking. Good leverage angle, especially for his size. Proactively adjust for play development. That's super duper key. A lot of players, like they kamikaze, they just kind of focus on the block. He actually ends up pretty much adjusting how he plays for the play itself. So I'm a big fan of that. Oh man, Kelvin Banks kicked his ass low key. Good tackle for loss. Helm is doing so well as a blocker. Missed tackle for loss on the bubble screen, but still saw it before it happened. Still sprinting on when he's on the backside of the play. So big fan of Nick Scorton, man. I mean, I really do think he's on that Marshawn Nealon type of tier where a good mover for his size, kind of a lot more polished than what you expect, and just a really, really, really solid player. Big fan of Nick Scorton. Again, I was a big fan of Marshawn Nealon. They're pretty much almost, I have identical grades coming into the draft. So big fan of that. This is why, like I said, Nick Scorton's an edge 3. Like he really is. Jihad Campbell. Like, I don't know what's up with him, but I ended up looking at the game versus South Carolina where he ended up having some really good plays. And this is going to be a combination of both his linebacker as well as his edge grade. So keep that in mind as well, because you'll see me grading him as a linebacker and then realizing how much I love him as an edge rusher. So again, I want to keep that in mind. So first off, he pops off as a major plus athlete. Some poor pursuit angles so far from a linebacker position. Good job sealing the edge. There's the start. He bit hard on an RPO, but he was not going to be the one to determine which read it would be, so I'm not going to ding him for it. Would like for his attention to remain solely on the ball and sub-process block evasion more. He has these moments where he forgets to go for the ball and attacks the blocker that is pulling him out of position, but it is also rare. So basically, sometimes he'll literally see the ball carrier coming, and then he'll just go you'll see red and just go and attack the blocker in front of him rather than just continue to play the ball. Insane pressure off the edge. Could he be used like Abdul? There you go. You see the reaction in real time. Reacted to option late, but he did at least realize it on his own. He missed a sack when releasing from a spy. Took him a little bit too long to get to the quarterback, but got the sack on with his amazing bend. Another great rush showing quicker disengagement. This dude might be an edge 3 or 4 in the class. Wow. Made the tackle at the goal line, but got powered through. Trucked a tight end, but broke the edge seal to do it. Better rep right after sealing the edge and making a tackle. I don't feel like he does much in zone and is a little raw in man. Times the snap perfectly as an edge 2. Good pass deflection at the line of scrimmage. I think that the second to last comment there is one of my favorite parts about Jaylen Campbell, why I really think he deserves to be a full-time edge rusher. He times the snap better than any other defender in this class, better than any defender I might have seen. Like, it's the moment the ball is snapped, this guy is going. And he was the number 1 edge in his class. I looked this up on 247. He's the number 16 player in the country. Number 3, I think, in Florida. He went to IMG Academy. He's the number 1 edge. He ended up having to go to linebacker because the edge rushing group had so many players. Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell. I don't know, there's a plethora of other dudes in there as well. And so, Jaylen Campbell is an edge rusher, is an extremely talented edge rusher. He was 215, though, as an edge rusher. He's now up to 244, too. But this dude is built to be a superstar at the edge rushing position. I really do think Abdul Carter is a really good comp for him because Abdul has a lot of the similar profiles that you're looking for. Maybe he might be like Abdul, but less polished as a pass rusher and better as a run defender. I don't know what that would necessarily be. Maybe you can talk about Andrew Van Ginkel, but still a big fan of it overall. This is going to piss people off. Again, I want people to understand the difference within the grades between 3, 2, and 1. It's pretty much a tied 1. But again, you'll see the main reason why is that I don't think he's a great run defender. If you are looking at a pure pass rusher, this is the best edge in the class by a noticeable margin because he is an elite athlete who has a very good toolkit, who is developing extraordinarily fast, I should say. And he's extremely effective as a pass rusher. So I really want to hone that in. But this is a holistic grade that really does evaluate his run defensibility as well. That is 10% of it. So if you think about mitigating the run defense when you look at the next 2 players, Abdul is edge 1 if you're looking primarily for an edge rusher. So like edge rusher as a pass rusher. So let's talk about his game versus Oregon. He flashes some solid anchor even at his size. Would like for him to look past the offensive lineman a little bit more. I hope it gets better. Run anchor is starting to fade a little bit. Kind of concerned with the identification ability, basically the understanding where the ball is. He reacts much later and focuses on winning the block more than going to the ball. Does a good job of going 100%, so great motor. He drove Connerly back, but the play was able to be stopped if he disengaged and focused more on the play than winning the engagement. He fell while spinning the second time he fell versus Johnny Cornelius. He was down on the ground again, but it was versus Connerly. So he ended up on the ground a little bit. I don't really care too much about that. Good bull rush, but he needs to disengage. Good inside move, causing the blocker to put an arm into his face. He did it again as well. Great job versus screen. I remember people got all heated about Abdul this game, but he actually ended up having that. I love that play versus the screen. He pretty much disengaged from the offensive line and made a big play. Missed an open field sack. I don't know who 91 is, but he is very dominant versus Abdul in the run game. Good quick win. And he ended up getting a hit on Dylan Gabriel. He picked up a lot of momentum and is performing far better, but to be fair, it is very heavy on the pass plays. So, again, that's where he shines, right? He is going to be the best pass rusher in the class, but I really did have some issues with him, and I've had issues with him over the entire year versus the run game. And a lot of people have issues with him versus the run game. If you are looking for a pass rushing edge rusher, this is your guy. This is probably the best player in the class. But if you're looking at a holistic view of the edge rusher, which includes run defensibility, there are issues. Continuing on, we got Braden Swinson. Y'all know this was coming. I'm fucking nuts. I'm a lunatic. I'm going to call it out. Do not follow my footsteps. I'm just being completely honest with how I felt and what I saw. Probably not going to end up here. I'm going to stamp my flag down. I think he is a top 5 edge in this class. And people are on that train now. I'm seeing even guys like Broshman. I'm going to spoil this for him. So you're getting a little insider info if you don't buy his little sheet. He is edge 8 for Schmo right now. And Broshman tweeted out saying people laugh about Jack Sawyer being a first round pick. Braden Swinson's above Jack Sawyer for him. So he says essentially, if you think about it logically, Braden Swinson's arguably a first-round pick. So I'm on board with that. I have him as my number 3 player in the class. I'm a super freak for Braden Swinson. Just keep that in mind. You're going to be shout out to my guy James Foster, who loves him. He has a mid-second on him, though. So I'm going to say I'm the new fanboy of Braden Swinson. But regardless of that, Swinson was someone I came into thinking, oh, I'm going to think of him as a third-round guy. I saw him via osmosis of watching other players. I was like, okay, well, this guy has some really quick wins. Like, he's good, right? He might end up being like a good pass rusher. But I did not think I would love him to this degree. Not a chance in hell. Like, there's just certain players that really do blow your socks off. And you're like, holy shit. Like, that guy's phenomenal. And Braden Swinson was one of them. So let's go into our game versus Alabama because he's going up against Pritchett. He's going up against Booker. He's going up against Proctor. He's going up against Roberts even, as well as Brailsford. He's going up against legitimate NFL offensive linemen. Maybe not elite starting quality offensive linemen. I think Proctor really could be. And that was who Braden Swinson played the most against. So I really thought this game was going to be super translatable. And it was one of his lowest graded games. Again, just keep that in mind. Good snap timing off the bat. He bull rushed and pushed back Booker. That was one of my favorite things. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, this guy just blew up the anchor of Booker. That is just crazy to me. Good use of length to pop Proctor. He went through CJ Dupre like hot knife in butter, doing an excellent job looking past the offensive lineman and being in position versus the run. He has excellent nonchalant block sheds. Nonchalant basically meaning he is like super chill with it. He's not even focusing on shedding the block. He is so focused on the play, and he is just like sub-processing the block shed. It is solid patience too. Only reason he is not in a better position is because he gets held when disengaging. He could maintain momentum a little bit better when going to the second blocker. And I said, Lamau, what a nitpick. One time he bull rushes CJ Dupre and Milroe did keep it. Or the one time he bull rushes CJ Dupre, Milroe kept it. So ended up biting him in the ass. His top speed is a bit limited given how quick he is in short area. Great job taking inside angle to pressure the quarterback. He flashed a dip and rip. So basically slip under, rip your arm up, go to the quarterback. He whiffed on a jet sweep, but ended up staying alive to make the play with the tackle. I love that about him. He basically just missed the play, but stayed alive. He kept, like really good motor. Ended up still making the tackle too, which is super huge. Wow, quick chop of Proctor's hands, but Caden ended up blocking him away from the sack. I ended up posting this play, and it was like one of my favorite plays I've ever seen between an edge rusher and a tackle. Caden Proctor is going to be a ridiculous tackle with the strength he has, and Braden Swinson got that quick win on him, and Proctor has that arm length and that strength to redirect Braden Swinson after the fact, after he was already beaten. It was great by both players, and if I'm Braden Swinson, I got a quick win on the tackle and I have a clear shot to the quarterback. Ain't no way in hell am I thinking Caden Proctor's ass is going to be able to touch me. I don't blame either of them. Excellent play. You guys should definitely see that. Again, it's on the X page, so feel free to go check that out. But it was fantastic. He drove CJ Dupre back in short yardage situation, which, again, you're talking about a tight end, but CJ Dupre might be one of the best, if not the best blocking tight end, like in the class. He is awesome, like a really good tight end for blocking. So it is like you're essentially playing against another quasi tackle. Straight up defended the flat route and scramble for so there was a flat route. I ended up posting this play as well, but there was a flat and Braden covered that. Milroe was scrambling and ended up continuing to scramble. Braden ended up going with him, and somehow, I don't know how the hell he ended up doing this, but Milroe ended up actually chucking the ball out of bounds. So really good job. He pretty much defended two plays in one right there. So there we go. There we go. We're back. Running a lot of plays away from him. So that's why I started seeing the offense was actually trying to avoid Braden Swinson, which is such a huge thing. Versus USC, I saw a lot of the offense going away from Abdul Carter, and that's why I fell in love with him there. Similarly, Alabama started playing away from Braden Swinson in this game. I really do think this guy's going to be a superstar. Like, I genuinely believe it, but I am the loony. Jaden Roberts is out one snap, and they ended up put Swinson on the backup, and it led to a sack. So that's just, I know that Swinson's not necessarily the guy there all the time at LSU. Like, people don't focus on Swinson the way they focus on Harold Perkins, right? But if you actually watch Braden Swinson, and you realize that the defensive coordinator realizes, hey, Jaden Roberts is out for 1 rep. Who are we going to put there? That offensive lineman is out of rhythm. He is not as good. That is their weak point of the offensive line. And they choose Braden Swinson? Like, talk about kudos. Like, the defensive coordinator is saying, I believe in you as an edge rusher who's 250 pounds, not 270 or anything like that, where he could be a quasi-defensive interior, to go toe-to-toe versus a guard. And he ends up making it work and getting a sack. Fantastic job right there. But I ended up loving this line after this next one. I said, still got a tackle on a play where he sealed the edge and stayed home. So this is another one I ended up posting. It wasn't a crazy play. He's not a crazy athlete, but he's still a very solid one nonetheless. But, and this is one of my favorite comments. Finally, CJ Dupre won a rep. Like, I got excited for him to lose reps in a low-graded game. I want to put that out there. This is not his highest graded game. He ripped under Proctor. Looks like he tweaked his hamstring after running after Milroe, which he shouldn't be the one doing because his top speed is not elite, while Milroe's is. I thought that was a little bit of mismanagement. Braden Swinson should not be toe-to-toe, one-on-one, trying to seal Jalen Milroe, and he did tweak his hamstring on it. So, regardless, he got sat on his ass when Booker got his revenge. He was on a pull block and sat Swinson on his ass. He ended up getting subbed out after that. And overall, obviously, I was fucking gobsmacked. I mean, this dude easily, and I mean easily, could be my number 2 player in the class. He is tied number 2. But I did give the little bit of the kudos to James Pierce, my little mini Dallas Turner. Oh, man, James Pierce, somebody who I was telling people, urging people, do not fall for him being the number 1 overall pick in these mock drafts because he is not ready. He is ready now. He is ready as a top edge rusher, and I love him to death. But you will see, look at the difference between him and Abdul. Abdul, the better athlete. Abdul, the better pass rusher. But James Pierce, a little bit more well-rounded. So, that's what makes him slightly better. But he does get that -1 for being 243. But let's talk about his game versus Florida. We talked about some other players versus Florida. Let's talk about James Pierce versus Florida, who had over 22% pass rush win rate this year. He drove Jake Slaughter right back into the quarterback. Off the bat, they used him against the center. I'm like, what the hell? So he ended up going up against a 310-pound center, ended up driving him back into the quarterback. Really nice wide zone run defense. I think I ended up posting that play as well. Redirected the defensive interior inside on a quarterback sneak. So he ended up, I think, pushing the defensive interior to be able to be in better position. Love that for him. Shifted formation to move the play away from him. So the offense ended up, and then he ended up shifting to the other side, and the play ended up going for a loss. So offense ended up lining up and probably motioning a tight end. I'm forgetting this exact play, but I'm describing to you what I'm actually saying because it is kind of in code for myself. But basically, probably shifted the tight end or just shifted the whole entire offense over to the other side. And James Pierce, rather than staying here and realizing they're going to run the play away from him, went to the other side and blew up the play. That's savage. I say he's a feisty motherfucker, like feisty MF. Really good push for his size. Gonna say it, he is Dallas Turner 2.0. Could work a little bit on wrapping up, but he is making tons of plays. Finally, the timing of these spins and moves are so much better. And that's what held me back. He was a 74.5 coming into the year, and it was the timing that was the issue. Not necessarily the moves or anything like that. It was the timing of when he would use them. He spun right into J.C. Latham's chest. You don't do a spin move into a player. You do a spin move to evade a player. This year, he put it all together. I think this dude's fantastic, and I think this edge class is ridiculous. I love you guys. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Hope you enjoyed it. See you on the far side. Peace.